Pleb Underground, it's 1-2-1. Fractional reserve, it ain't 1-1. Rug one day, they want to run. Zug took a peek at the 1-1. We got to go, but I'm not ready. Scroll the socials, it's bot heady. Volatility around and yet spot steady. You want the story, but the plot feddy. This ain't golf, but I'm always to a T. P's a man of intent, like in a TP. I'll bring some energy, ATP. Politics retard us. Dollar, now over ATP. His only question, will they do what's right? They never question Hill, morality, not black, white. They question orange pill, they buy wrapped shite. Same run of the mill, but you question quite. Free Ross, day one. Lil Hiccup, please hold tight. Need to talk to the Ripple shill. He paid to be on site. I always question Phil. Yo, the number's looking aight. My only question still, have you seen the light? Line up in rows, enjoy my tenderloin feast. New privacy throws like how CoinJoin ceased. We don't need heroes. We're the ones that anoint least. Fresh new collab flows underground with CoinBeast.
That was absolutely awesome. Guys, welcome back to the Pleb Underground, another live episode, the first live episode of 2025. Joining us today, we've got the strongest and best looking Bitcoin entrepreneur, David Bradley. But before he joins us on stage to talk about all the spiciness that's going on, we are going to share a word from our sponsors. Here we go, guys.
It's like people only do things because they get paid. And that's just really sad.
Pleb Underground is brought to you by KnowHue. Go check them out at knowhue.com. They are building Amazon for Bitcoiners, a one-stop shop for Bitcoin-only brands. New brands are going to be added every month, so go check them out. Don't miss what's happening at knowhue.com. Pleb Underground is brought to you by CypherSafe. You guys all know I am a pet rock enjoyer. Love the swag, love the collectibles. This is the ultimate Bitcoin collectible. That's right, guys. We're talking 16 ounces of solid titanium, the Bitcoin Rolo Triangle. Go check it out at cyphersafe.io. Pleb Underground is brought to you by ThunderFunder. Go check them out at thunderfunder.com. ThunderFunder is a funding portal registered with the SEC and a member of FINRA. Their mission is to provide retail investors access to investments while supporting the growth of open source projects. They love Bitcoin. Check out their shitcoins. ThunderFunder.com. I realized that I was muted, I think, at the beginning. So anyways, our special guest today is, like I said, I don't know if anybody actually heard, but the strongest and best looking Bitcoin entrepreneur, David Bradley. In Canada, specifically. I have to mention Canada, right? David Bradley, man, it is absolutely awesome to have you join us on the show. And this is going to be I think it's going to be a crazy roundtable because we've got a lot to discuss. And a lot of this is pretty spicy, right? Like a lot of people feel like there's a lot of emotions about, SAB 121 and what's going on with Microstrategy and what's happening with in-kind redemptions and the whole entire space, right? Fred doing an SAB 121 shitcoin. What the hell was that?
I love that, I kind of don't know, anything that you're talking about right now.
No?
Phil, it's all,
come on, man.
Fucking nonsense. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. Yeah.
All right. Well,
so,
then I guess
can we start with Ross maybe?
Who? I don't know who you're talking about.
Mr. Ulbricht, who didn't get released day one. Anyone
he
else
got released after 30 hours.
I don't care.
Hold on. When did day one start? This was the whole. The whole entire debate.
This is the point, right?
T equals 0.
You saw the meme, right? Barron with Trump, and Barron says, hey, David Bailey's on the phone again, Grandpa. And Trump says, I don't know who that is, right? The Bitcoiners have paid some money to get in the door, but what we're seeing right now is the Ripple have paid quite a bit more to be on site, right? They're actively campaigning against the SBR, whether you like that or not, right? But we've seen them have campaigns of misinformation before with the bullshit Greenpeace campaign, although that skull turned out to be kind of a cool bit of art, but they're not good for the space, and I think Bitcoiners are learning that the lobbying game involves people with some very deep pockets, and the shitcoiners are one group of them.
So I think the initial premise that you're operating from might be a little off here, because the premise that I think you're coming from is that it's a good thing if Bitcoin and nothing else gets in good with the government. And from my perspective, I think
SPR.
I think
but I just think Ripple in general are bad actors in the space, and like shitcoiners in general lobby for all sorts of things that doesn't surprise me, but it seems to surprise some of the Bitcoiners who are like, oh, we're finally here now, like we're in the political scene. This is now like I MC the second stage at Nashville, right? The main stage I refer to as the politics stage, because it was all politics, right? That's how it is now. Bitcoin is all politics.
Yeah, there's a big assumption that we want Bitcoin to be, owned by the government, for example. And when we're talking about the U.S. government, this is an arm of the U.S. Federal Reserve, really, which I would argue is probably the single most evil entity in the history of the world. This is an entity that has imposed a form of communism, essentially, onto the entire world, for lack of a better term, and they've done it in the guise of freedom. And so from my perspective, I think everyone is better off if the United States government and the Federal Reserve, therefore, really just never get into Bitcoin. I think the only people that will benefit, whether it's Ripple or Bitcoin, from a strategic Bitcoin reserve, are those who plan to sell their coins on a short-term price bump from that. So if you're not in that boat, like, who really cares? Like, Ripple's really just another arm of the traditional financial system, and having bankers bribe the politicians to get money for free is not really like anything new.
No, but I think this is the cycle of Bitcoiners feeling like they're rich and they have influence, and then realizing maybe they're not quite as rich and influential as some of the the older money players, and some of those shitcoiners maybe kind of are almost in that grouping. What do you guys feel like has been kind of the success of Trump's presidency so far, other than Ross being finally free?
I mean,
are we getting into just political analysis here?
Yeah, I guess we're diving right into politics, but I mean, look, right? Everyone's going to have such different opinions.
He's the Bitcoin president, guys. I thought no.
He's not the Bitcoin president. Like, it's fucking nonsense. But I just want to quickly go back to something that David said, right? Like, I don't actually care, right? Like, let the government get wrecked, right? Let them go and buy shitcoins. Like, who cares, right? Like, it doesn't make a difference. That's one side of it. But the thing that I don't agree with, right, is like, I genuinely feel as though and I guess that's just the nature of the beast, we're on this unfair playing field, right? Which is just life, I guess. So there's not much we can do about it, because, right, Ripple they have a marketing arm. They have marketing money, right? Bitcoin, it's a bunch of Bitcoin enjoyers that decide, okay, I am going to take issue up with this, and I am going to drive this, right? And they have to essentially drive themselves. Now, I don't know if that really matters, but in the grand scheme of things, I mean, Ripple was able to pay Greenpeace, and they've been able to make a whole bunch of noise, right? And unfortunately, they've been able to dupe a whole bunch of unsuspecting noobs into buying something that is not Bitcoin, but pretending that it has the same qualities, if not better. And that's just that's really what gets to me. So yeah, I don't care. The SBR or SSR, I don't care what they do. I mean, at this point, like, you saw what Trump did in the first 48 hours. What did we have? We had 3 shitcoins, right? We had 3 shitcoins, or 2. No, what was it? 6? I don't even know.
Something like that, dude. Like, it was like $4.7 million of, like, I swear it was like 6, something like that. It was like Avalanche, and like, I don't know. There's a whole bunch of nonsense, right? Like, and then $47 million of Bitcoin. Right?
And people seem to also
no. It was 47 million of wrapped Bitcoin. They buy
well said. Good point, right? They buy
right.
wrapped shit. Exactly.
Essentially,
and yet
it ain't Bitcoin.
Ethereum. It was all Ethereum.
Saylor said it was Bitcoin, right?
I don't know how long
he did.
How long are people going to continue to listen to him? And whatever he says goes. It's like he's recreating, he's rewriting what it means to be in the club. And it's just so funny to watch people justify and rationalize why they agree with him.
Do you guys think Saylor is CIA?
Is Saylor a spook, right? The famous question.
All CEOs of publicly traded companies are assets or intelligence officers, whether they like it or not, because fundamentally, war in the modern era is done economically in more ways than any other. And we saw this today with this week with AI, right? We saw the Chinese take how much, like tens of billions of dollars off market cap of US AI companies just today.
There's $1 trillion on the stock market by holistically.
Nvidia was down 10% today. Is that right? Like
15%.
Okay, fine. This is the point. Like war is largely economic these days, right?
Yeah.
Right.
That is a very good point.
They attacked the US financial system pretty hard with what could possibly be just a meme.
Isn't it beautiful? No, one sec. Isn't it beautiful? For once, like geopolitical friction has created something that actually empowers the individual, that actually benefits normal people instead of harming them, right? Like a lot of kinetic war harms people. A lot of economic war, I guess you could say, harms people, especially if you're holding Nvidia shares. But then that kind of highlights the point. You shouldn't be holding equities because you're always at risk of some competitor fucking your shit up. Which is why you should be saving in some money and investing in things that you actually know about, that you can keep track of if you really have the capacity to do so. Right?
Not only the competitors, but the actual entity itself I mean, we could see MicroStrategy do the same thing, whether it's taking out exponential amount of debt, exponentially more than they had in the previous quarter or previous year. And then, of course, issuing more equity. So it's like those kind of things. Of course, Michael Saylor promised to do that with MicroStrategy, but you never know how that's going to flesh out with any of these other companies where they say, we need a little more funding. We're gonna water down your share of the company, and that's always the company is always essentially a direct risk to your assets that you own.
I really like how you say the company, because there's this thing in Prison Break called The Company, and it's basically like deep state, and so it kind of like beautifully matches kind of what you were saying. Short drive to Langley.
Yeah, just to go just to go back. Yeah, that's what I was going to say, right? So in terms of proximity, right, there's a lot of people who equate, well, look, MicroStrategy's not like it's right up the street, from Washington, D.C. Okay, so in terms of yeah.
Do you think when the CIA places covert assets, they're like, we'd like it to be a convenient commute?
Right? Like, this is what they're thinking, though. They're like, we want to make sure that this guy can, right? Back and forth.
And if
nice,
you're in
easy,
trouble,
they don't
we
want
want
him
you to
getting
be able to get to Washington pretty quick as well. So,
Remember, also 90% of their base business is government contracts. Go ahead, Phil.
Sorry, because this is what I'm thinking of, right? If you looked at the shares that MicroStrategy offered today, right? This STRK thing. So this is the first time he's offering shares that pay a dividend. Okay, so you know how he was talking about how he's going to essentially turn MicroStrategy into this like financial vehicle, for Bitcoin, creating all of these products. So I think that this is kind of that first foray into seeing if he can pay a regular. I think he's doing an experiment. He's checking to see if he can actually pay a regular dividend, because when you actually go read the prospectus, right, they don't actually, MicroStrategy doesn't actually earn enough to cover their what's it called? They don't earn enough to actually cover, let's say, all of the payouts. Let's say they were to pay out a dividend, right, for every single shareholder. They wouldn't have enough based on their income. So I think that he's actually, I think he's trying to figure this out to see, because the price on the shares that he's giving is $100. That's the initial strike price. So I'm just,
these
I
new
don't know. I feel like
shares-
he's doing an experiment.
Yeah, these new shares will essentially be like, it's almost like breaking the company into two, right? The new shares will essentially be paying dividends, obviously based only on the income that they bring in. So really the new shares represent the legacy business and whatever money that can make. And then the main shares, which already almost entirely represented their Bitcoin holdings, will be less valuable by the equivalent of whatever those dividends are. So it kind of is the equivalent of turning the main shares into just a straight ETF.
So the
Like
new
there's-
shares are going to be for the legacy software business. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the new
Yeah,
shares
he's only
presumably,
issuing 2.5 million shares, which I also
Yeah.
thought was like kind of a small number, right? So that's interesting.
Which is like what you said before, Phil, because I remember you said that MicroStrategy's underlying business is only like 2 to 3% of their company's value. So that's, I mean, I'm not going to say they have 100 million shares outstanding, but it's like if it's a small fraction, I guess that makes sense. And it's like, what do you want to own? Do you want to own the Microsoft software, platform and the thing that competes with MicroStrategy software platform that competes with Windows, or do you want to own the Bitcoin, the Bitcoin business? And you can have two choices. And one, guess what? We're incentivizing one where it has a dividend and blah blah blah, and this other one, hey, Bitcoin number go up. Good luck.
So speaking of which, right? Speaking of owning the asset, I just want to I want to talk about that. Did you guys all see Larry Fink's announcement this week? Essentially that about the in-kind redemptions, right? Because this is something that BlackRock actually wanted to. They actually Larry actually championed this way at the beginning, and essentially he had to back off from that. And they said, listen, the SEC said, well, look, we're going to approve this, but you're only going to be able to do the cash redemption. So in-kind redemptions, for the people who don't know, right, is that let's say you were to sell your IBIT shares, you could feasibly have the option to take custody of the Bitcoin, right? Instead of having the IBIT shares, right? You could have that option. And it got me thinking, right? Because most shareholders, like, I mean, if you've ever bought equities, you know that you don't really it's not like it was back in the day, right? Like you don't get a stock certificate anymore, or at least not at my level, right? I'm just a retail, nobody, so I don't get a certificate or anything like that. But once upon a time I did. And there was this materialization that occurs where you're like, I own this thing, right? I can go somewhere, I can redeem this thing. Yeah, exactly.
Phil,
Today there's nothing.
They call them shares, right? Because they're meant to be a share of like a whole thing. Whereas I think they're called shares because you have to share the ownership, because you never you never really own them, right? Like,
so how many of the investors are really going to take ownership of Bitcoin instead, right? Because I don't mean to be the dampener on this party, but I feel like if they wanted to take custody of Bitcoin, they already would have. So, am I missing something?
I mean, at least they can change their mind at some point. There is this like looming 6102 attack that seems entirely obvious that that's sort of where the question about the CIA comes from, is that what essentially Saylor has done with MicroStrategy is pull in a lot of retail money in order to get Bitcoin to store at Coinbase and
Dave,
Fidelity.
I've talked about this a whole bunch, and it's not just MicroStrategy, right? It's also
all
all
the
the
ETFs
ETFs that
and the exchanges.
have their funds there. So we've got like 2 million coins in
For
like
two.
institutional and retail custody with Coinbase and other US custodians, and that number's increased over the last couple of years. There's been like a US onshoring of coins. Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And I said, at what point do we get this 6102? Is it when it gets to 3 million coins? Is it when it gets to 4 million coins? Well, if the number keeps on increasing, why should they ever do it? If more and more control is under like US like institutions.
Yeah.
But this goes back to MicroStrategy, right? And this goes back to David's comment about Saylor being a spook, right? He's got over 400,000 of these Bitcoin, and this actually, I genuinely think, right, that this is how the state, right, the state in brackets, intends to co-opt Bitcoin, right? Because they can see, like, if you're paying attention, right? If you're paying attention and you're at that state level, you can see that Bitcoin is something that is being asked for by the people. It's a grassroots movement that is growing, right? So the government can actually they can kind of co-opt that into their own thing and say, look, that's where you get the SBR from, and they say, look, we're going to hold Bitcoin, and all of a sudden your government, it doesn't seem so crappy anymore.
My
even though
question to
it's
Dave
the same
is does the like seize of the Bitcoin happen formally in terms of like taking from the companies to the government, to the Fed, to Treasury, whoever it is, or do we just see this number in US custodians keep on increasing and increasing, and then you just have the kind of soft ownership of it by the US state? Like, when does it flip, and like when do you think that would be?
Yeah, we're in the first or the second stage now that you mentioned. We're in the soft ownership stage. Like, they're already there. And the way that I see it, like, there's not really a good way to answer the question of when it'll flip. The saying is always like gradually, then suddenly. And
I'm asking you to like place a bet almost, rather than like price talk. Like, when do we see some, states getting spiced?
Yeah, what I expect will happen, there's only two outcomes. Either the United States government and every other government in the world will somehow learn fiscal responsibility and stop spending more money than they bring in, or they will have to they'll have to eventually seize the coins, right? Because inevitably the goons that are employed to maintain their monopoly on violence and therefore back up their monopoly on the creation of money will no longer accept the shit that they print. And this has happened already in places like Venezuela, where the military stopped accepting bolivars, and the military to this day in Venezuela is paid in US dollars. And so I expect this to play out in a whole bunch of different places in the world. And in most cases, the failing currencies government will switch and begin paying their goons in US dollars. But the US dollar, when this eventually happens to the final boss of fiat currency, there's only going to be one place to turn. And at that point, their choices are going to be, we take the coins, they're in the custodians, and continue to spend them, or we stop spending. And it's pretty obvious there's no appetite whatsoever for them to stop spending. And so they will inevitably have to do that. And the silver lining to that, like what I expect them to do, is probably something along the lines of, we're going to take the coins, but we're going to give you these IOUs, these paper Bitcoin that are just as good as Bitcoin because they're backed by the full faith of the US government. And then they'll spend the Bitcoin. And then the nice thing is, at the end of the day, they will run out of Bitcoin because they can't make more. So the people who are putting their Bitcoin in these custodians are almost just like prepaying their future taxes to keep the empire alive.
I will say that
the tax benefits are going to get rugged real soon, I'm sure.
Go ahead, Phil.
No, I was just going to say, I think the government has absolutely no, and this is any government, right? They have no intention of not kicking the can down the road. Like, we see Bitcoin a specific way. They, I hate saying they, but they see it a different way, and we take it much more importantly than the government does.
You just assume the government's pronouns, Phil. I'm pretty sure, like,
I'm totally assuming the government's pronouns. I don't know what to call them.
The only pronouns that exist are he and she in the Trump era, and so therefore you can't say they for the government. You need to pick: is the government male or female? Phil, choose.
Well, the U.S. is definitely a she.
There's still plural.
It's the panopticon. Whatever it is,
you pay taxes to her. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's right.
I'm gonna go with it's the monster, the machine.
But
if the government was a business, nobody would buy any of its shares. Sorry, Ulrich, go ahead.
That's right. That is true. But I will say that in terms of the inevitability, if we're going to talk about inevitability like a straight line, the dollar will be an intermediary for that extreme situation before they get to Bitcoin. And that's the thing. Like, and I use this argument.
Yeah, Mark's been calling it the whole time.
Yeah.
For the people, I know that people think he's a doomer. Go ahead, sir.
But I would say that Michael Saylor's even said in the past that at some point all these different fiat currencies will whittle down to 3, 4, or 5. It'll be the dollar, the euro, the yen, or whatever. The yen probably won't make it. But it's like there will be this era of where all stakeholders, all government stakeholders will use a set few of strong fiat currencies. Meanwhile, there is this underlying Bitcoin adoption as a store of value. People are using it as a medium of exchange more places than not. But those have to break down first. And I just think there's so much backing with those systems, with the euro, with the dollar. And I know people have been saying that the euro is going to die in a year, and it's like, it's just not going anywhere. There's so much infrastructure, there's so much reliance on it. Meanwhile, people are barely understand how to say Bitcoin or Bitcoins. You've seen those videos with the state Bitcoin reserve stuff that Porter was trying to push out. Like, people don't know what Bitcoin is.
You say this, dude, but like
years.
Europe's getting poor, bro. Europe's getting poor, so like we need it more. Like and
yeah, but they're getting poor. They're going.
Like, how do you get off like Bitcoin? Like do people I think they're using it peer to peer, right? And they're using it for cash. But like I know in certain like European jurisdiction, if you hold it for more than a year, you can no couple of gains. Like
there's also a strong contingency of people who don't even know what it is or what the difference between it and a token from World of Warcraft is. So it's like we're still so far from like for a lot of people even seeing it as a legitimate threat, or as a legitimate utility juxtaposed to a fiat currency. Go ahead, Phil.
No, I just wanted to add, I like a normie conversation that I had this week. Somebody came by to do some work in my house, and we got to talking, right? And of course, it always seems to eke out into politics, right? And interestingly enough, the two things that this gentleman mentioned was that he didn't like, okay, was that Ross was freed, okay, that was the first thing, okay, and the second thing, that the government is considering Bitcoin and he didn't call it a strategic Bitcoin reserve. He was like considering Bitcoin as an asset. So it right away, like the mainstream, like what the average person is seeing and what information is coming into them, it's got nothing to do with Bitcoin. They don't understand it. They don't even understand what happened with Ross. They don't understand. It's so foreign.
They're also behind the timeline. Like what they're talking about with Ross and Bitcoin, and they don't want Bitcoin to be seen as legitimate or as an asset. They're still in the Silk Road timeline. Like they're literally in a time capsule that's stuck in 2015, 2014. They're so far behind. We're not going to see people like whoever was in your house for contracting or whatever they were doing. Those type of people are still going to be 5 to 8 years behind what's actually happening now. That's why it's like when I see people who are buying IBIT or FBTC, I still feel like they have a little bit of time before the 6102 kind of stuff comes along. Like they can whatever.
Yeah, I think you guys are all talking nonsense, because I think in the next 2 to 5 years, like half of corporate jobs won't exist because of AI. So like so many people are going to be losing their £1 million houses that they just put mortgages down for, like and losing their jobs. They're never going to get like another job for. Like the so many jobs markets are going to get decimated by AI. As well as all those corporate fiat savings, right? Because they had a bunch of savings in Nvidia stock and things like this, right? That got wrecked today.
Which proves the reason for holding Bitcoin and why, and also the nascence around Bitcoin, where you really still have a few years. You said 2 to 5 years. That's a long time for people to wake up
for the government to say, "Oh, wait, you Bitcoiners have got some money. Hey, maybe you should pay for like all of these like corporate wage cucks. Thank you very much. That lived on printed money for the last 10 years. That grew their wealth, grew their lifestyles on printed money, right? People that work for these pharma companies, right? That work for these banks, etc., right? Like their jobs wouldn't exist if not for printed money, and they think like they have no idea. They have no idea about this. Like the whole of society is about to fall off a fucking cliff for multiple reasons, but also the AI is going to steal their job while it happens. And I think, I don't know.
I'm skeptical about the AI stuff.
Huh?
I'm skeptical about the AI stuff. I think
it's not gonna take all the jobs, but it's gonna be
yeah.
like you can if you're a smart person, like and you do some sort of white collar job, you can do a team's work of work.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think
now.
It's more so that there's just going to be more work done. But the problem that's going on with that group that you're describing, I like to call that group mostly the lube industry, because this is like the lawyers, the bankers,
industry.
The lube industry, yeah.
The lube industry.
Everybody who works, pretty much everybody who works for Deloitte or all the big consulting firms, etc. Almost all the lawyers and accountants in the world, their jobs only exist so that it doesn't hurt as much when the government fucks you. And all of those people, like that industry is not going anywhere. That industry is going to keep growing because the government is just say
that, but like these you can now like do all the IPO stuff like real quick. I don't know, like some of these financial lawyers, I don't know, maybe they're not going to exist so much.
But companies like Deloitte, though, are very rigid. They're very rigid with their earnings and everything like that. So I would assume that everywhere that they can replace any person with AI, they absolutely will.
I think you guys are missing the point. You guys are completely missing the point. It's not going to be like, oh, these companies like get distilled down and they're cutting out half their jobs. It's more like new companies come along that use way less people and grow at way faster rates and produce a way better product that people actually like, and they grow sustainably, and everyone turns away from all of these fiat like monsters that just exist because they have long-term contracts with all of the big players, and it's just how it is.
All of that makes sense.
We got somebody that chimed in. Look, my wife literally lost her job to AI.
Yeah, I feel like he's making a rude joke, and I'm here for that. Respect.
It's okay. Got to show
it. I expect that we will get a lot of those like new companies that those will be the companies that can actually develop the skills to leverage the AI properly compared to like the big juggernauts that don't move. And in a world with market forces properly operating on the economy, those companies would definitely displace the juggernauts that are less useful than them. But we don't have a market economy.
Hillbilly Will. You need to get your wife like using AI and like to take someone else's job with it. Like we can do this. Like DM us and I'll send you some links.
We're going down the wrong path.
We're gonna crush these people.
We're going down the wrong path.
I'm gonna
David, bring us back home here.
Yeah, I'm gonna train an AI agent to bitch at me, I think. Play.
I'm already.
You say that, but
I don't need an AI.
You say that, you're joking, but actually, this is kind of like legit stuff. You can be like, basically get it to like to prompt you to do stuff, right? It's like instead of just having like reminders on your phone, you're like, oh, you need a bit of persuasion to do it as well. Fine, like you can kind of create all of this stuff today for yourself in a self-sovereign manner, guys.
So did AI just become a notification app?
No, it's more like, hey Phil, what I don't know, what software do you subscribe to? What SaaS do you use? Just rebuild it. Yeah, like anyway.
I think to your point though, right? Like this is the awesome thing about disruptive technologies. Like we don't know what we don't know. We don't know how badly something is going to get disrupted. We don't even know what new industries are going to come along. This reminds me of like all the people that were afraid of the cars, right? The horse and buggy people. That's it. You're putting us all out of jobs. But think of all the industries that flourished because of cars. I would say it's more industries than the horse and buggy, right?
So electricity is same thing.
Same thing, like, so what? Those guys going up and down the streets with the candle things, like they lost their jobs. Yeah. Big deal. Look at all the other stuff that was created. Sorry.
I think the fundamental problems in the economy are a much bigger issue than the AI explosion coming up. And if we were in a scenario where resources broadly across the economy were allocated properly and allocated with market forces and people with skin in the game making decisions with their own capital rather than the government stealing a vast majority of all the capital in the economy and allocating it however they deem fit, there would be a case to be made that AI would be extremely disruptive, but I don't think it would be disruptive in a way that would lead to less prosperity. Maybe fewer jobs would get more stuff done, and ultimately that would create further jobs in the same way that transportation of cars created more jobs. The more productive we can be overall as a group, the more resources there are going to be to go around. The problem now is that it doesn't really matter how many extra resources the AI can help us create. The government is going to waste them on painted sidewalks and, girls' climate action in Brazil or whatever, one of the things that was on that waste list.
That's why you need to pair it with Bitcoin, right? That's why you need to be like, creating things where you're receiving Bitcoin and not touch the fiat system.
In previous iterations, it seems to me, of technological upgrades, it's like, it seems to me that the people that end up entering the new jobs based on those technologies are more skilled. Do you think that that's going to be the same with AI?
Yes. Look, I think like basically you're going to have true quality, more widespread in so many more things because it's going to empower the people that are the most skilled the most. Like it's an accelerant, essentially. It's a catalyst.
Yeah, I agree. I mean this because I mean, look, having seen the different iterations of technology, and in all honesty, have being wrong in a few of them, right? Because to be honest, like there's quite a few things that I just like when the internet first became normalized and people were talking about one day you're gonna be able to stream movies. I did not have the foresight to be like, yeah, bandwidth is just going to expand. It's going to continue to grow, and all of this technology is going to get better. I did not see that, right, at that time. Now, obviously, I understand a lot more, and so when I look at AI, I do think that it has this massive potential, right, to create all kinds of stuff that we don't even come close to understanding yet. And I don't know. I think the fear of it is much more about it being used against us, right? Like, wasn't there something that recently came out that what was it, the U.S. government? I thought Lola Leeds put out a tweet essentially about wanting to essentially use AI to essentially prevent money laundering from occurring
DARPA.
in the future. Thank you, DARPA.
DARPA, yes, essentially a minority report before money laundering, profiling you to basically convict you before a crime would happen.
I feel like that kind of already exists because you already have like intent to do something, conspiracy to do something. Like if you plan to do something but you don't actually do it, like you can
but intent, like they still have, like they have records where you're saying things, where you're preparing like you're objectively preparing things rather than just profiling you and saying Lola's essentially saying based on your disposition, your behavior.
Definitely. Like
it's taking
like based on your questions.
further.
Like, as in, like, if you're like, hey, what's Ted's manifesto? Like, how can I write a better manifesto than Uncle Ted? How do I send bombs in the mail? That kind of stuff.
Even more than that, that's probably closer to what we already have. I think it's more of just like your behavior, your test on a 16personalities.com thing. It's like, because you're an INTJ and you do this and you do that. That's essentially what she's implying that AI is going to use to drum up some disposition on you before you would even think about writing a manifesto or think about asking AI to write a manifesto. So just even another degree away, which is essentially trying to predict the future for criminal activity.
So all the more reason why you should be running AI locally using open source software like the Chinese just released, right? Yes? No? Is that kind of the point, right? Because
that
theoretically,
isn't that crazy, right? Like to me, it's like, okay, so the Chinese can be like, hey, we could like fuck over the Americans economically and like just steal their business, or we could just like put it out and just destroy them and not take the business.
I think open source is always a disruptor, as they say. But again, also as AI becomes mainstream, I'm not certainly trying to.
How often does the lead software in any industry get put out that's open source? That's a very rare thing that happens.
Yeah, well, I mean, Bitcoin with the
sure, but was there an industry of Bitcoin before Bitcoin? I don't know if they're kind of what. Does that make sense? Like
open source has been kind of new. Open source is kind of new.
I don't think open source is new. I think that's bullshit. Open source has been around for decades.
Yeah.
Like I think
Goes back to the
I just
60s.
think it's usually like it's something that trickles
I'm
up
gonna
and
look it
like
up.
maybe it's like a best product, but it doesn't usually get like really well known because
That's
to do so, like you have like a cost to it, right? Here,
that's I guess
they're throwing money away, and it's a seemingly weird economic decision because I think it's war, right? Like,
will be
but it's-
also because they can monetize in other ways. When you put out the platform, you can monetize in other ways, and that's what I was talking about when I say
get
it's
the users
newish.
first.
What I mean, like it, in order for open source to scale, you have to have a repository that can be accessible to everyone. So although open source may be around back in the 60s, who is actually able to access that open source? So now you have the GitHubs, now you have cloud computing, where open source solutions can manifest in a natural way where they couldn't before our modern day technology. But I guess what I'm saying is this opportunity, as much as we're talking about AI right now for this podcast, what we're also seeing is that it's now taken a step up in terms of public awareness, and people will want to use it. Just today, I just downloaded the whatever the Chinese AI app just to
DeepSeek
see like
R1.
what's the
Yeah.
DeepSeek R1, just see what the hell is everyone up to. But it's like as more people just download it, as my mom, as my grandma
They should try
downloads,
playing with Claude though. Like,
there's going to be new. They're going to have these data centers that are going to stand up. I've seen that there's a need for potentially getting into more energy production more than ever before, and that could lead us down to more nuclear solutions. So where energy demand is there, guess what? Energy demand is out there, and these data centers need to be run. Oh, while we're doing that, we can go mine some Bitcoin as well. It's like all of this, everything we're talking about is moving towards an increase. We need more energy, and where there's more energy, there's more abundance, there's more prosperity, rather than trying to find a way where we're trying to use less energy. So I'm kind of happy about this AI kind of conversation.
Well, we're gonna switch gears though from AI. I think we've done enough selling for.
I'm trying to help. I'm trying to help all these Bitcoiners get rich. Seriously, like you got like 2 years to make all your Bitcoin, guys, and then like that's it. Pretty much. Like, good luck.
All right. So another kind of like another method I think of attack from the state here is this reappeal of the SAB 121, right? Where I saw some people cheering for this. But essentially, what this is that you're muted, Walton.
Wait, 121? Did you say 121? This is episode 121.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. How
weird. And last week we had something with 120. Anyways, that's freaking weird. But yeah, so essentially, right, like as of right now, banks, sure, they can custody Bitcoin and shitcoins, but they are not. It's a liability on their balance sheet. So with the reappeal of this, it means that now all of a sudden, right, they can count it. If I understood correctly, they can count it as an asset. And I think that this is where we get into some weirdness, because to me, this kind of starts to sound like the makings for a 2007 mortgage crisis style type of thing. I don't know why, but like it's just all of a sudden, right? Like, hey, now it counts as an asset. So is it worse?
Yeah.
Maybe it's made worse because of the volume, like the amount of money, right?
Go ahead. I think where they're going to go with this is stablecoins, and I think the government and the Fed are just kind of on the verge of realizing that stablecoins are becoming really useful in terms of propping up the global US dollar demand and the global sort of like US dollar hegemony.
You think just realizing? Come on, Dave.
Well, I think it's somewhat recent anyway that like Tether has really taken off, and Tether's gotten to the point where it's not like an accepted US friendly asset, but I think they're holding too many T-bills, and they're too big to fail
Tether
at this point.
CIA,
I think
dude. Like
maybe
the foreign dollar, like USDC, like is for the like home soil, like.
Well, maybe. So the Tether, you're right. Definitely, Tether is the foreign dollar. I can see this new change though opening up the door to things like a JP Morgan coin, like a JP Morgan USD coin. You know what I mean? That would be sort of like the domestic equivalent of Tether, and or it may end up being USDC. They may back the horse that exists.
They already
but,
own some Circle, right? I'm pretty sure. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
I see it staying
No,
divided.
you can purchase
because
Tether on U.S. exchanges.
No, I mean as in like
Sorry.
Sorry, I mean as in the fiat banking already have like investments in Circle, unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah.
Was the point. But I see that splitting, right? The Tether essentially enables the US to kind of retake the Eurodollar market and have it backed with T-bills. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Tether's definitely exporting the US dollar. I mean, that whole theory, I mean, people could say whatever they want, but we've said this before on our show, like they're playing the best game out of everybody. They are playing the best game. They hold the most treasuries, and they're able to sit there and essentially kind of blanket say, yeah, we've got the money to back this, and they're totally left alone. I know they have their independent auditors and stuff like that, but nobody trusts them. So right now, Tether is being allowed. Right? Tether is being allowed to
rugged
grow.
on treasuries. The whole point is you can be rugged on treasuries by the country that owns it. Right. And so why would a company that is hated by the US and could be at risk of like being, of course, shout out Mark Goodwin again, like if they could be at risk of like having an issue with the US government, why would they keep buying more and more treasuries? Oh, maybe it's because there's already some sort of deal, right? Like, why don't we hear enough about it in this space? Well, because like Tether, Bitfinex own a lot of stuff. They own Blockstream pretty much, bunch of journalists, few conference
influencers
things.
Influencers too.
They own a canton in Switzerland, I believe now. Like where they say, oh, this is where people come and learn Bitcoin, and you can pay Bitcoin in local merchants, but Tether's the like leading actual like thing that and they have some guy that wears t-shirts for them that helps that helps states adopt Bitcoin all over the world.
Speaking of which, right? There's Tony just brought up Swan, so they're
Swan,
having.
Bro, we're not going to talk about Swan.
But they have that whole thing going on with Tether as well. So it's Tether's everywhere.
Tether rugged them, right? Tether rugged them on the mining business, of course, right?
It's brutal.
Tether has sued them.
Yeah.
Tether sued them
so it's a perception thing, right? Somebody thinks they've been rugged. Someone else thinks they've been rugged. Both people think they're entitled to what's theirs. You gotta love it. I don't know. I just think Tether's playing this game the best out of anybody else, right? Coinbase probably had an opportunity to out-tether, and they didn't. They're playing a different game. They're playing the custody game where they're essentially going to magically have to fork over everyone's Bitcoin that they're holding. Yep. I don't know. This whole scenario, I know it sounds crazy, but it totally has the makings of a bubble. It is completely like, because if you think about it, we haven't had one since the 2007-2008 mortgage crisis. Okay,
well, so the bubble that everybody's juggling.
So the jobs bubble. This is my point with the AI. Like you've got this on both ends, and it's gonna be yeah. All right, the next 5 years, crazy.
I'd be less worried about the jobs bubble and more worried about the commercial real estate bubble, because commercial real estate is a giant
nothing's happened with that mess. For a while. I heard like a year ago or 2 years ago that 90% of commercial real estate in Manhattan had zero or negative equity. Like, how does this stuff keep going? Like,
well, so from what I understood, though, because what I've experienced with commercial real estate, at least in my case, is that the companies that end up, let's say, renting this stuff out, they do it for like a 5-year lease, a 10-year lease. I know that in the company that I worked for, they actually had a 20-year lease. So it's like you're not going to see it necessarily right away because the companies are kind of stuck still paying for it, or they're going to have to pay some type of a premium to get out of their agreement. So that's why I think right now we're not seeing the problem entirely. But I think he's right about the commercial real estate. And I've been wondering the same thing, because to Walton's point, we've been hearing about this for a few years now, that this is going to happen any day. And car loans as well, right? Car loans are supposedly like cars are totally under. You know, nobody can afford their car apparently. So I don't know. You know,
I do want to ask. I do want to go back to the SAB 121 because there, this is bothering me. The banks are essentially let loose, or they're not going to be penalized for losing assets. Is that what they're looking for? Banks are not going to are looking to have less obligation to the negative fate of assets that they're custodying. Like, first of all, I thought that banks were already allowed to hold Bitcoin. It's just that they were going to be chiefly responsible to whatever happened to it. And in my opinion, why is that? Yeah, why are they not liable for the bank getting hacked for someone's Bitcoin? Why are they saying, oh, now because of SAB 121, now we don't have to be liable for someone taking what we're supposed to be protecting? What's the benefit of this?
Yeah. So they'd still be liable if they lose it, potentially. That depends on the terms. Like if they're custodying somebody's Bitcoin for them, there's an IOU contract there, and whatever the terms of the IOU contract are would determine whether they're liable for the Bitcoin. The difference now is that they can put it on the balance sheet as they hold it. It's not just an IOU to someone; it can also be an asset. So it's kind of just a financial game, and that's
okay. So it's
financial games. Yeah, the financial games are where the hazard comes in, really, because like circling back to the commercial real estate, that's the reason that it hasn't exploded is because the regulators and the Fed have been sort of playing these games, not dissimilar balance sheet games, for the last couple of years, and they've done these sort of on the fly as catastrophes have arisen. When you had the Silicon Valley Bank and the other banks that flopped last year or whatever, and they basically created some structures along with government-backed credit that would allow JP Morgan to basically soak up all these underwater loans. And that works for these tiny little banks when you have a player like JP Morgan that can absorb them. But as the banks that fail get bigger, the entities that can afford to absorb them become fewer and fewer, and the games that the government's able to play to back those loans become more and more dangerous. And really, that's the fallacy of, and that's the big problem here. That's what caused the 2008 crash, is that these so-called financial wizards in their ivory towers believe that they can actually control all these things by pulling strings, and it works until it doesn't, basically. And that's essentially what I think we're likely to see with any one of these bubbles. They're going to pop when somebody pulls the wrong string or doesn't see what the string they're pulling is attached to, essentially.
I think that's very well said.
Isn't it funny how, like, all of these new rules that have been coming up in regards to Bitcoin have nothing to do with enabling or empowering the individual. It's all about how can Bitcoin become more like the traditional financial system. We're not becoming like this class of Bitcoiners that are coming in over the last 2 years. They haven't been educated the way that people that were around before the FTX thing happened. I just felt like once the FTX thing happened, they were trying to figure out a way to, now that FTX happened, let's bring in all these regulations so we can make Bitcoin more like the dollar, more like the euro. And all it's going to do is delay the true adoption of this network for a large contingency of newcomers. And where people like me that kind of spun up real fast, I kind of understood the basics real fast. I feel like it'll take a potential cycle and a half for people to get it. And it's really a shame. And they're going to all under the pretense of you're doing it good. It's not like Coinbase and crypto. You understand that you kind of understand that you're gambling there kind of early on. It's like, and you may not care, but now it's like all of your Bitcoin heroes are going to tell you that this is the way. Your Bitcoin bank and your Microstrategy. Not to say it's not okay to bet on Microstrategy a little bit, but the idea that you think that it could be near equivalent to Bitcoin, you're taking self-custody out of the equation entirely. We're in this fiat stage now, and the only people who are going to get wrecked are the one's not holding their keys.
Everyone gets Bitcoin at the price and time that they deserve, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and very likely the vast majority of people will switch to Bitcoin to avoid starving to death rather than because they think it's a good store of value and they understand the trade-offs.
Be a last hope, yeah.
Yeah.
Phil, unmute yourself, bro.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, there
Sorry.
you go.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that we have a comment here from Bitcoin Croissant. That's all. You're just talking croissant. That's right. The proof of reserves.
Please that Phil can actually pronounce it, but he's like from like the French part of Canada or something.
Yeah, because my mother tongue is French.
Yeah,
I can actually speak
really good.
Saying the word croissant is hilarious. They're like, can I have a croissant?
A croissant? It's a croissant.
You say there, like.
It's a croissant.
Like, why?
I'm also
why,
from
why
like California, so it's like
Dude.
the surfer drawl. I
Yeah.
can't put an accent on my words if I had a gun to my head.
All right, where were we?
What other topics do we have?
Where were
He
we?
said
here?
gun to my head. I think James Bond. Then I'm like Volcano Bond. They're still not here. Like.
No volcano. We're not going to talk about El Salvador today.
Why not?
Wait, no, but didn't
Actually-
like Trump and Bukele are like best buddies now on the phone or something? No,
Are they?
I don't know. Probably talking about how they can like
How many?
do better authoritarianism on like the bad guys in their countries. Like that's pretty
Maybe
what it's
send
about.
back all the El
It's
Salvador
it's nothing
criminals.
to do with Bitcoin. It's to do with like beating like gang members. That's what it's about.
It's croissant. Oh, that's
Croissant.
terrible. Yeah, that's great.
Croissant. That's West
Oh,
Virginia.
God. Yeah. No, sorry, I'm just a little under the weather, so my mind's a fog.
Let me see what other
Switch
topics
your
do we
diet
have
for
listed.
croissants.
Let's see. In our
Maybe
know
Phil, maybe you could just like go over to the piano and play us a tune for a minute, like while just
I already explained to Roman that I'm a piano LARP. I don't actually play the piano. So yeah, because he already said that. And he was like, "Why don't you go play the piano?"
It's a dog that played the piano. You got to be honest with these things.
I can't
you
play
know,
the piano.
there's something that kind of I think we kind of grazed over, and it was the or maybe we didn't talk about it. It's the BlackRock ETF in-kind redemption.
Oh yeah.
Now here's something that I want to
It's only for APs, bro. It's only for like authorized participants. It's not for like
and even so it's like it's that incremental kind of thing. I understand that, and maybe one day it could be for the general audience, for the general investors, retail investors. But my question is, does this make, let's just say you are what is AP authorized participant? Let's just say you are an authorized participant, and does this make BlackRock a decent way to acquire your Bitcoin, or comparable to, let's just say, CoinBase? Let's just say you're not buying from miners or buying from a Bitcoin only exchange or something like River. Let's just say you have the choice between CoinBase and BlackRock. Doesn't make it kind of competitive to CoinBase? What's the difference?
Dude, what do you mean? Like the Bitcoin of IBIT is custodied with Coinbase. What do you mean?
Yeah, so
you're saying
I guess what I'm saying is
difference.
So I guess it really is none. That's what I'm saying. It's what it turns out to be is another avenue, another outlet to just acquire your Bitcoin.
The question is
the difference is that you can use your ETF and park it with custodians and people and borrow against it, right? Whereas you can't do that. I guess you can do that with your Bitcoin from Coinbase, but your Bitcoin from Coinbase, you still have to like withdraw it to get actual Bitcoin to then do that with, right? Does that make sense? Like the ETFs, I guess, are something that you I don't know. Can you? I don't know. Maybe there's no difference. Maybe there is no difference.
And maybe they're going to have to do something because of that. I guess my next question is: would they have to put some sort of extra products on this ETF product in order to pull away, users from the Coinbases, from the Binance. And maybe it is the things like you talked about, like an easy borrow against, whereas Coinbase has this the weird little process to borrow against their Bitcoin. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, it potentially makes them a competitor to like an OTC desk, but like I don't know what the fees are like to buy the ETF and then to take it in kind. There's probably a fee also.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, there could also be a spread difference on the ETF versus spot Bitcoin. So there might be like a difference.
Most likely will be.
But realistically, like the people who'd be able to take that path of buying through BlackRock and then taking the Bitcoin in kind, probably bigger buyers, and they'd have access, or they'd probably be more sophisticated buyers to be able to figure out that they can go to a big OTC desk and get it filled straight away. So it's probably only useful for people who have some reason to hold the ETF and then want to later take custody. And that may be a tax benefit of some kind. I'm not sure.
Sounds like wealth managers, kind of like the main sort of thing. Like, to me, a lot of this BlackRock trying to bring in regulation is actually seemingly more about them not getting fucked over by Coinbase, because I'm pretty sure there was something that happened a few weeks ago, a couple months ago, where something else got reestablished that was like, hey, I don't know if it was like, oh yeah, you have to be making these Bitcoin purchases the same day, or there was, I can't remember the details of it, but essentially it was like, stop fucking around, Coinbase, and actually do what we think you're meant to be doing for us. Was the vibe. And then since then it was weird how the price then started like going up like properly. Like it wasn't.
I think us Bitcoin enjoyers are going to be a little bit disappointed when for the ones that actually care to figure out how many people are taking their Bitcoin in kind instead of just taking the cash. I said this before. I don't see it. I think it's a LARP, right? Like I think that it's one of these things where it's great that they're doing this, but how many people are actually going to use it? I don't see them doing it.
I don't care. Bitcoin is mined. It's not in kind.
Yeah, I don't care either. But that's the point of giving opinions, right? Like,
a lot of these platforms and a lot of Bitcoin. What I've started to realize, a lot of Bitcoin is LARPing. They people and the products, they posture themselves to feel like they are here for the revolution. They're here for the movement. And at the end of the day, they're here for their fiat gains. They're here for their profit. But I kind of do, even if they offer it and only 0.1% of their buyers act on it, I'd say that it's do I dare say net positive? I don't know if I say that, but
because that's all it is. I mean, you got to call it what it is, right? That's what it is. It's a net positive,
Yeah. And it's like, it may fall flat because everyone who's buying the ETF is a finance bro, but the idea that they have that available, why do they have that available where they don't have that for the gold ETF or the silver ETF or some other ETF? It's like there's something special about Bitcoin that even BlackRock was moved to make that decision to offer that. I think it shows the importance of where Bitcoin is for the world in the future.
Even if it gets one large holder to move their coins out of the ETF and into self-custody, then it's a net positive. But it probably isn't going to matter that much.
Yeah. No. All right, Tony's rushing us along. We were going to invite Tony on, but now we're not going to invite him on anymore.
Why would anyone?
Were you going to send him a link, or are you talking about next week?
No. It's up for the next episode.
I think you should have done. Like when there's like someone in a comment section and they're talking a lot, I think it's beautiful when they get brought into the show. Like I think anytime I've seen that, like any Bitcoin, it's fantastic. Anyway, all right.
We could do that once.
Why would anyone want to own the ETF though? Like if basically you're like, hey, I'm a custody cuck, why would you not go for the leverage play of MicroStrategy? Like what? I don't understand. Like, can anyone explain this to me? Like why would anyone own the ETF? Like logically,
well,
like if you Is
There's
it
a
just
premium.
The borrow play. The borrow play.
There's a premium on MicroStrategy, right, on the Bitcoin that they hold. So, like, why would you? And when you buy MicroStrategy, you're basically
Derivative,
gambling on
right?
you're gambling on the premium going up or down compared to the ETF, basically. So, if you think the underlying Bitcoin is really what you're going for rather than that premium, then that would make sense.
That's why I think you just do self-custody Bitcoin. I don't understand the middle play of ETF.
But there are people that can't access it,
or gambling, or
there are buckets of money that can't access, Coinbase or River or Strike to buy Bitcoin.
I just think these are like pussies that should liquidate their corporate government cuck assets.
Yeah, but those people also
all nonsense. You guys think you're getting a tax break? You're all going to get rugged.
All right, just tell us what to think, okay? And we'll think it. That's it. We're done. No more opinions.
They may only want Bitcoin for 2 years. Then what happens?
Yeah,
then?
It's a gamble on.
I don't care about the ETF holders. They're just wanting. They're just getting exposure to the price. Who cares about these people?
Yeah, the ETF is basically the middle ground is basically a gamble on the tax break versus the timing of the rug pull, because you could the best move would be to make the most money you can in the shortest period you can, pay the fewest taxes that you can, buy the most Bitcoin that you can, and then pull it out right before the rug pull. But obviously the trick is when is the rug pull? So that's kind of the gamble. I don't think anybody who's holding the ETF is really thinking about it that way. They're just thinking, hey, I can hold, in Canada here we have we can hold Bitcoin through an ETF in our tax-free savings account. There's no way to hold self-custody Bitcoin in Canada, at least in a tax sheltered account. So that's where the logic comes in. And when you get these fiat normies coming in and they've already got their tax-free savings accounts, it's not a bad move, to be honest, if you don't get rugged, basically.
So you're saying Hawk Tour and SPY on that thing?
That was funny.
Where's the delete button? No.
Do we even have a delete button? Yeah. Oh, there is. Okay. I never realized it. There you go. I learned something new. Oh, yeah.
There's with the time we have left, you're probably going to stick around another 15, 20 minutes. I'm wondering, do we talk about, because we barely mentioned Trump. Do we talk about the Trump coin and his impact on Bitcoin? Or do we go into MicroStrategy and give these people a segue into, I guess, allegedly?
No. They're going to be able to hear MicroStrategy Mondays. They're going to be able to hear all that.
We actually talk Bitcoin rather than nonsense like politics.
Here, Walton, you pick the topic again.
Oh,
because you picked it up. Maybe we
should talk privacy.
No, shut up. We're going to talk self-custody. We're going to talk self-custody.
We've been doing the whole.
And we're going to talk more. No, actually, real tools. How we're going to help the people. I want to hear from the Bitcoin brains of Canada. How do you suggest people learn more about self-custody and what are you excited about these days? I've been talking recently about how Nunchuck implemented Taproot multisig. I'm waiting for all the signing device manufacturers to catch up, but we're getting there. Some real upgrades in privacy actually on chain there with Taproot multisig. So
wait for the Taproot.
We're getting there.
Upgrade.
We're getting there.
Yeah. I think all that stuff that's happening at sort of the bleeding edge of technology isn't going to help the mass of custody holders right now. Unfortunately, it's probably going to be pain that causes that, and the most likely pain is the big pain of the entire stack being rug pulled with 6102. But from a purely utilitarian perspective, it might actually save a lot of people a lot of problems if there was some kind of a smaller rug pull between now and then, because going back back to the sort of early days of Bitcoin exchanges, the lesson was don't hold your coins on the exchange, right? Because people used to use that as essentially their savings account, throw them in their empty Gox account or their Quadriga account or whatever other exchange rug back then. And I can tell you, nothing has done more in Canada for self custody than Quadriga, our big exchange, rug pulling everyone, and all those people who got burned learned their lesson. And there's kind of like a parallel with COVID, in the sense that COVID was this massive scam that really ultimately woke up a lot of people, right? And so something else, some kind of a catastrophe, some kind of a government overreach that highlights the problem of holding your custody in Bitcoin and shows how either the government or these private entities holding your Bitcoin can end up losing your Bitcoin, can end up costing you all of your funds. That's probably what's going to be required to make people really wrap their heads around self-custody in large numbers. And whenever that 6102 comes, I guarantee you self-custody is going to be ubiquitous after that. So it's I don't know that we can build a good enough UX to convince people. I think it's the stick rather than the carrot that will lead to large-scale self-custody adoption.
Did anybody ever find that CEO of Quadriga? Because I remember the last time he was like in India or something like that, supposedly, and
that was the last place he was.
Yeah, he allegedly died in India.
Allegedly.
I had dinner with the guy a few times and never knew him to be. No, pretty.
So
pretty.
I hope he paid.
India
I hope he paid.
Yeah. Before the India trip, and one of the details that came out was that he allegedly had Crohn's disease, and then died in India.
India seems like a weird place to go to, if you've got Crohn's disease. That doesn't seem like the best.
Yeah, it's you have an inflammatory bowel disease, so you're gonna go eat a bunch of street curry. That doesn't sound like an amazing idea. But I never
story about how to where you could disappear the best. So maybe someone's been talking to Trace Mayer or something,
Well, so I imagine you can probably buy a fake death certificate in India fairly cheap. And so the idea that he may have just disappeared is not all that far-fetched. It was a lot of money. There's also a possibility that his former co-founder of the business, who is a shady guy, may have had him killed. That's totally possible also. And maybe he actually died, but he's gone, and so are the coins. And so to the holders of the coins, the holders of the IOUs from the exchange, that's really all that matters. Whether he stole them or he died and lost them is immaterial. It's every exchanges custodians will find every possible way under the book to lose your coins eventually.
Yeah, I really do think that exchanges are some of the best teachers of self-custody. And I have a person that I used to work with that got rugged on Silk Road. And so I mean, how long they've been waiting, right? And in the end, you know what happens. Some of the people just got the nominal amount back and not the actual Bitcoin.
So I just looked up. It was late December. It was $250 million Canadian dollars. But late December 2018, right? I'm a late 2018. I know the price is mid four figures, right? Basically, maybe high four figures in Canadian dollars. So what? That's quite a lot, right? That's
yeah, it's a fair bit of money.
Right?
And it
and you got to remember at the time, right? How many Bitcoin that really was. So
yeah. It also came out after the fact, and this is based on blockchain analysis. So take with a grain of salt, because that's all a little bit false, lots of false positives in there. But it came out that he had actually been sending a lot of those coins to BitMEX over the years, a lot of what should have been the customer coins, and presumably gambling on leverage on BitMEX. And so it's possible that he actually lost a lot of those coins
and losing,
and then
right?
Yeah, and then it's also possible. The rumor was that he might have paid out this guy. Mike Patron is what he went by, but his real name was Omar Donani. He's a convicted money launderer from the United States. It's possible that he may have paid out that guy to kind of get him out of the company once all that came out about him. That was an unsubstantiated rumor that some of the coins may have went there, which I don't know. There's a Telegram group where all the victims of this rug pull were sort of talking to each other, trying to get answers. And this guy was in there, this Mike Patron, Omar Donani guy was in there, like trying to, like, threatening to fight people in the Telegram, and like just absolutely bizarre. So the chances that there's more to the story than the official bit seem likely.
I did not know that stuff, so I appreciate it. I did not know anything about Omar or anything, but the first name that you mentioned, the Mike Patron, that name sounds familiar.
Yeah, he was Mike XBT. He was big in the Bitcoin community for a little while on Reddit especially and whatnot, and all the stuff about him changing his identity and whatnot came out, and he left the company at that point, but there weren't really any details about, you know, whether he still had ownership or whatnot. So it was a situation where, like, it seemed entirely obvious that a rug pull was coming, and it seemed obvious, like, for years almost, that a rug pull was coming from this exchange, and yet people were still holding their coins in there. There was actually a point where the market even knew a rug pull was coming because the withdrawals were so slow that there was like a $10,000 premium on coins in Quadriga because you could pull the coins out but not the dollars.
That's interesting. That's interesting though, right? That's kind of the reverse. Usually you can pull out the dollars, you can never pull out the coins. So
Yeah.
that's
That's California.
Yeah,
well,
right. Yeah,
there's a lot of excuses. You can give a lot of excuses to not be able to withdraw the fiat, and there are really good excuses, especially back then. The banking in Canada for Bitcoin exchanges was really bad. It's still really bad, but the exchanges, the excuses the exchange had at least made sense back then. They'd be able to blame the banking industry for the fact that their wires were not going through fast or whatever it was, but there's not really an excuse for why the Bitcoins aren't there to withdraw, other than the Bitcoins aren't there. So
exactly. Walton, Eastside Tony's wondering if you've got Labra Hodl there with you.
Yeah, I winked.
Okay, good stuff. Well, guys, look, this is going to wrap up this live episode of Pleb Underground. But before we go, David, I'd like you to tell the viewers and listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me a bunch of places. Right before the show, I was bringing up my personal brand website. For anybody who doubts my title of strongest and best looking Bitcoin entrepreneur in Canada, you can find more about that there, bitcoinbrains.com. And I'm Bitcoin Brains on virtually every platform, so you can find me on all those things. We also have our CoinBeast YouTube channel where we've got a number of shows, including Ulrich's show on there. And, I've got my own little mini podcast where I just rant for a while. Thus far has only been posted to Twitter, but going to get those up some other places fairly soon. And you can check out the companies I'm involved with. If you're in the United States, Bitcoin Well is my preferred choice for a non-custodial Bitcoin exchange. Never holds your coins. Very good rates, very good platform. If you're in Canada or Europe, it's Bull Bitcoin. So check all of those things out. And I want to plug our conference that we're putting on this summer also. Would love to see you guys there if you feel like making the trip up to Calgary. June 28th and 29th, it's the Bitcoin Rodeo. It's bitcoinrodeo.com. So we got early bird tickets up for that.
Very cool. I'm a huge fan of Bull Bitcoin. I have used that exchange. I have an account there. It's, anyways, by far one of my favorites. Forces you to take self-custody. There's no choice. You just take self-custody. Anyways, all right, guys. This is going to wrap up this week's episode. Don't forget to check us out on our audio-only platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. Thank you again, and we are going to catch you on the next live episode. Peace.
Take care, everyone.